Hi, everybody. Welcome back. And if this is your first time, welcome. 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 My name's Max Haddad. And today I'm going to talk about how to support the people that you love when they're having a mental health struggle, whether it's addiction, depression, anxiety. I'm not a doctor, not a psychiatrist, anything really. And how to help them when they've begun treatment. So, yeah. The disclaimer's out of the way. My experience with mental health is I'm a drug addict. I've got bipolar. I'm medicated. I've been sober for years now. But from the age of 13 to 28, mental health problems, addiction, and everything that comes with that, legal troubles, what else? Hospitalization, rehab visits, breakups. That's nothing compared to the other stuff, but breakups, problems with all that comes with it, ruled my life. So this advice, this unsolicited advice, well, you clicked on the video, you son of a bitch, is is coming from somebody who has been there, has been in the hole, has been helped by people, has been hurt by people who were trying to help, and has seen the frustration and even helplessness in the faces of the people who love me the most because they didn't know what to do. And in a lot of cases, they tried everything. So I made a video on this previously. The first thing that I would suggest, maybe not the most important thing, but the first thing that I'm going to say is don't fall for any bullshit. And I'm not talking about the person who's struggling. That too. But there are loads of people who will take your money to help you. And they might even think that they're going to help you. But they're not. And how do you tell the difference between somebody who is probably in a position to at least make things easier and someone who is just in it for the money, happy to take your money whether they help you or not, or in it to help but they can't? How I have been able to differentiate is people that were able to really help me were more than happy to say, I don't know. If I asked them a question, if I told them a struggle, what should I do? If my parents asked them, they said, I don't know. The people with all the answers are either self-centered, in it for the money, greedy, or overly confident. Because if every question had been answered when it comes to mental health and addiction, don't you think the thousands of people who are going to college for 12 plus years would have those answers and the problem wouldn't be getting worse, it would be getting better, despite drugs being more prevalent, despite, maybe a modern civilization making you more unhappy than we would have been 300 years ago, whatever. So I'm not going to go into a bunch of details, but there were so many people who had the answers. Max just needs to make a bunch of new friends. He just needs to listen to good music and write down a list of things that he likes to do. So when he's craving heroin, he goes and he plays softball instead of using. It's not that simple. Well, it's very, very simple, but it's not that easy. So stay away from people that are going to tell you everything because they just know how it works. It's not that simple. And I would say 99.9% of the time, say you're the one dealing with someone struggling, you know better than everybody. So, and you might be in a position like my parents were, like my siblings were, they didn't feel like they knew anything. They had no idea how to help me, and they still knew better than basically everyone. They could tell, with zero room for error, with zero error rather, when I was under the influence or not, when I was having a hard time or not. They didn't need a doctor to diagnose it. They could spot it from a mile away. Max used recently, or Max is isolating and depressed. They didn't need that advice, but it's so easy when you feel helpless, I believe, to fall for BS. And don't do it, because you're going to waste your time and you're going to waste your money and you're going to support the people who are really making it harder for all of us. So to follow up on that, then what I just said, trust your gut. If you feel like this person who's struggling, if you're a prick to them, they're not going to respond well, well, then don't. Just try to be loving. If you feel like the best thing for them is to tell them straight up, hey, I know that you might be suffering with something that is genetic, something that is biological, but I believe there are things under your control that you could change to at least make your life a little better and healthier. You're allowed to tell them that. You're allowed to say, hey, I'm not telling you to pull yourself up by your bootstraps or whatever, but I'm telling you, laying in this dirty room all day is not going to make you feel better. So go outside or clean the room. Unless you are physically disabled and cannot do those things, you can at least go have a self-pity party on the front porch in the sunshine. You can at least do that. My mom would tell me that. I was not good at listening. I was, bigger than my dad by the time I was 12. That probably wasn't helpful. I didn't feel like there was really any authority in my life. But if you have some authority over the people that are struggling, or at least some say in their behavior, you can't control anybody, but you know what I mean, I hope. It's okay to be blunt and prompt them to do things. The through line, in my opinion, with all of this, though, needs to be that it's coming from a place of love. You're not telling them stuff from a place of vindication, right? Like, yeah, I caught you using, so now I get to call the shots. I had girlfriends that would do that. Guess what? They didn't call the shots. I didn't listen to them, and I didn't like them either. Not great for a relationship. You're not telling them what you're telling them from a place of, I know right, and you're wrong, and I know everything, and you don't. And you're not telling them from a place of, you're just too much. I just can't handle you. I just can't care anymore. You just have to go. If you're feeling frenetic, if you're feeling out of control, if you're feeling like you're at the end of your rope, then you're probably not in a position to make any positive change in this other person's life. And maybe that's just true all the time, but it's certainly true when it comes to somebody that's having a really severe issue, whether it's a psychotic break or they're in the middle of a terrible relapse. That doesn't mean that you can't do things to try to be helpful, but maybe when you're feeling like you're at the end of your rope and there's nothing you can do other than freak out, maybe then it's time to call in some help. And who that help is, what that help is going to have to be up to you. Hopefully it's not some of the BS talkers that I told you about, whether that's family that you can really trust or professional help. It's difficult sometimes to choose to call family. I know, because a lot of my siblings felt very differently than my parents did. So when my parents would call them, they would have a reaction that actually made things worse. Or calling the police. It can be very, very, very scary to call the police because I don't want my son or daughter to get shot because they're having a mental breakdown. It's hard to trust the police sometimes. So I guess the real answer then is difficult because you're in an emergency. But try to catch yourself before you end up at that point where you are about to lose your mind. I've said this in a different video, but as long as the person that you love who's struggling, seriously struggling, is still alive, there is hope. So the best thing that my parents ever did for me was keep me alive. If they had shunned me, kicked me out, handed me $500 and said goodbye, I would have been dead for sure. There were a few times where the only reason I wasn't dead was either because of dumb luck or I was at my parents' house and they found me. So it's okay in the middle of a crisis to take care of yourself. And I hated hearing you can't do anything for anybody else unless, you can't love anybody unless you love yourself. And I don't know if that's true or not. But when I saw my parents dying to help me, it made me feel guiltier, which it should have. That's a reasonable reaction. Addiction is a mental illness, so I didn't choose it, but I think, a lot of my behaviors made them miserable, and so I think that's an okay reaction. But when it comes to mental illnesses, schizophrenia, OCD, just, terrible depression, anxiety, addiction, it's not under the control of the person who's suffering from it. At least not at first. When they're in treatment and have made some good choices for a while, then yeah, it's more under their control. But so them feeling guilty might temporarily cessate certain symptoms. A schizophrenic is not going to stop. And I don't know enough about schizophrenia, so I'm sorry if I sound ignorant. It's not going to stop hallucinating because they feel guilty. But, that guilt, even if it temporarily cessates this struggle, it probably is not going to be permanent, because if it was up to the person struggling, if it was totally under their control, whether they were in that emergency or not, if I was in a relapse or not, I would never have picked, past the age of 16, I think, probably, I would never have picked to be in a relapse versus being sober. Even if it meant being sober, I was miserable and I would have to fight through some emotional damage or whatever. I would never have picked that. And I don't think most people would pick it. So feeling guilty, feeling like you're killing your loved ones with your sickness, it's not a permanent solution. And so, like the guilt trip, whether it's intentional or not, is not the way to go. And so taking care of yourself, I think, so that you can better set boundaries and be authentic and be genuine. You don't have to pull punches. You don't have to say, oh, well, you're sick, honey. It doesn't, it's okay. You're allowed to say, yeah, it's screwing me up. It's all I can think about. And that'll make them feel guilty, but that's very different, in the middle of a genuine conversation than you having to go to the psychiatric hospital yourself. So, yeah, careful with the BSers. It's okay to take care of yourself, set boundaries, trust your gut. Now, in the case of addiction, there's naloxone you can keep around in case they go through an overdose. I don't know about medications for things like psychotic breaks and stuff. I mean, there's anti-anxiety medications, but I can't speak to that. Keep Xanax around, hand it out like candy. I don't know how that works, but maybe. It's okay for you to go to the doctor for someone else. It really is okay for you to go to a general practitioner or otherwise and say, my husband has addiction, and I don't know. I don't want to walk in on them in an overdose and have nothing that I can do other than call 911. You're allowed to go to the doctor even if you're not sick, just so you know. You can just go because you're bored and you want to hang out with a doctor. But really, you're allowed to go. You don't have to wait for an emergency to figure out what you should do. You can figure it out beforehand. And I know, like, preventative medicine or preempting things is exhausting. At least it is for me. I don't want to put in effort unless I have to. Especially when I'm already so distracted with like a perpetual emergency that's happening in my life, it being somebody else who's having a hard time. But you're allowed to have things in place in case shit hits the fan, for sure. You don't have to just cross your fingers. It's a big day now. They're going to treatment. What does that mean? The addict is going to rehab. The person who's been unmedicated for their mental illness is going to a hospital, to like figure out what's right for them in a supervised setting. As I got older, my parents definitely stopped doing this, but it was very frustrating for me as an addict when I already felt like most of my life was not under my control. Even when I was alone, I wasn't under control, when choices were not allowed to be mine. When it came to medications, when it came to where I was going, and of course money plays into this, but where I was going, when it came to where I was staying, when it came to, listening to the doctor or not, one of the best choices I ever made, and that helped me to ultimately get sober and stay sober this time, because I had relapsed literally at least 20 times, more than that, but 20 like serious real relapses or whatever. The best choice I made, hair in my mouth, was everyone in my life was telling me don't get on Suboxone. Suboxone is an opiate replacement, basically, without the high. It fills your opiate receptors. That's not what this video is about. And everyone, including my frickin' lawyer, was telling me, don't get on Suboxone. It's just a crutch, blah, 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 blah. And I knew that I needed a crutch. What's wrong with a crutch? A crutch is better than just laying in the road with broken legs. At least with a crutch, I can walk. And so I got on it, despite what everyone said. And having that agency and that control, in addition to the help that the Suboxone provided, I felt like I was really doing something for myself. So don't, especially in the case of maybe like a preteen or something like that, somebody, you know, where you're literally, they're too young, you have to sign off on stuff. I think this is a serious enough problem. And in most cases, I think even a young person understands to some extent the severity of it, that it's an adult problem. I think it's okay for you to have a conversation with them like they're an adult. Especially if they are an adult, then it's definitely okay. But I know that when you go from having to take care of somebody, literally babysitting them so they don't hurt themselves, to a week later, now they're in treatment, and now you just, you know, I'm not telling you to wash your hands of it, but you've had to control everything for so long that it's like natural. I would guess it feels very natural, and it feels right because it has been right. You've had to control what you can control. But even if the individual suffering finds the right solution, if they don't feel like they're the one that chose to do it, it may not work. It's that silly sometimes. Mental illness is that ridiculous sometimes, that they have to be the one to have decided to be on this medication for it to work for them. You know, they have to be committed to it. I don't want to talk on and on and on. I'll just summarize real quick. When somebody goes into treatment, let them decide how seriously they take it, even if that means that you have to be disheartened. Any period of time where they're healthy and they're not struggling and they're at least thinking of what it means to be healthy and what it would take is a win. And it's a big win. Any day that they're alive, that's also a win. So don't fall for the BS, because most of the sites you find on the internet, most of the people you'll meet with all the answers, most of the doctors, most of the psychiatrists don't have a clue. They don't, and they should, but they don't. Take care of yourself before you get into so low of a pit that you can't help anybody. And remain hopeful. Don't give up. I have met so many people that recovered from addiction and other illnesses. So many people. It's easy to think nobody gets better. It is. The news, you know, I was told at AA meetings and NA meetings that, you know, only 1% of people get healthy, blah, blah, blah. Lots of people. It happens. It happens often. So it really can be okay. And if that means that somebody needs a crutch for a while, that is so much better than them going to the street or having a breakdown and getting in legal trouble. You know, you don't have to, it's not black or white. You don't have to go from very, very sick to totally healthy. In fact, you probably won't. But if you have to take a baby step towards healthy, that's okay too. And eventually you'll find some baby steps that are permanent steps. And then the person will end up at healthy and hopefully stay that way. It really can happen. So don't give up. Take care of yourselves. Talk to you soon. Bye. Oh, and if you want, subscribe. Talk to you soon.